All right. Well, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce recognizes and appreciates the historic connection to this place. We also value the contributions that Inuit, Métis, and other Indigenous people have made, both in shaping and strengthening this community, province, and country. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Chamber's Executive Summit on Artificial Intelligence. I'm Ulrike Bargedalia, the Senior Director of Digital Technology. No, actually Digital Economy, my title is far too long. Digital Economy, Technology and Innovation. I'm also the Future of AI Council Lead here at the Canadian Chamber. So welcome to today's summit. I have the pleasure to MC and host it together with a lot of fabulous speakers and colleagues and the Deputy Minister of ISED, Simon Kennedy. So yesterday I wrote we have well over 200 registrants. Well, we have close to 300 because a lot of people will join us virtually, and hoping a few more will join us here in person in the room as well. And I like to think this speaks truly to the importance and relevance of this topic, and AI is everywhere and anywhere these days, as I'm sure you know. And just as of this morning, before we came into this room, we held our first Future of AI Council in-person meeting, or hybrid. We had people to join us virtually as well. And the Canadian Chamber incepted that council on November 6th. It's a brand new council with 30 members across sectors, sizes across the country. It's very exciting. And I think it's a very opportune time and the right time to do so. And the council discussed areas of priorities and focus. And many of them we will touch upon today, such as, but definitely not limited to, having a look at the present state of AI in Canada from the views of the government and industry, exploring ongoing efforts, including the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act in Bill 27, also known to many of you as ADA or IDA, and its potential impact on AI development and business adoption, and assessing how organizations can respond and adapt to new risks and opportunities that come with the adoption of AI. I don't think any of these areas come to people as a surprise, but there will be more to be discussed throughout the day. And there might be some surprises, I hope so. I love novelty effects, actually, and what it can present us with. A little bit run of the show. Today's summit will begin with a government keynote address by Deputy Minister Simon Kennedy of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, also known as ISED to many, followed by a fireside chat with the Deputy Minister and my colleague, Catherine Fortin LeFaivre, who is the VP of Strategic Policy and Global Partnerships at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. And then we'll dive into a panel discussion to explore what artificial intelligence means to business leaders. We have 4 panelists and a fabulous moderator there. And lastly, we'll conclude the summit with a networking reception and an immersive headset experience through Meta's MetaQuest technology, highlighting the work of Canadian Indigenous artists. And you can see some displays here as well in the room already. Now, before I hand over my mic, I'd like to also take a moment, very importantly, to thank the event sponsors. Without them, such an event would not be impossible. Microsoft as our title sponsor. We have Amazon and SAP as the presenting sponsors, and Meta. A big thank you for sponsoring today's reception. So thanks, everybody. And now I like to hand the floor and mic to Nicole Foster, Director of AWS Global AI ML and Canada Public Policy, to introduce our esteemed keynote guest. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here with you today and welcome you on behalf of the AI Council and also on behalf of Amazon. So my role is dual. I lead both the global public policy file for AWS as well as Canada Public Policy, and work primarily on the AWS side of the business, or the cloud computing side of the business. And so we work with companies like Bank of Montreal, Sun Life, the NHL, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, and Lululemon, to give some Canadian examples of companies that are leveraging the cloud to innovate. We also work very closely with the Canadian startup community and have supported over 10,000 startups in Canada through our Activate program, which awards up to $100,000 in cloud computing credits. And I should say that is $100,000 US of cloud computing credits to startups that are looking to build in the cloud. And AI/ML has been a focus at Amazon for over 25 years. The parts that you might be the most familiar with are, the recommendations that you get shopping on Amazon.ca, or Alexa, which utilizes over 30 different machine learning systems. But AWS is the part you might know less about, and we work with companies or organizations in all sectors of the economy and supporting how they are leveraging AI to improve their productivity, enhance their competitiveness, and better serve their customers. And so with that breadth and depth of experience on AI, we are very pleased to work with governments around the world to help them consider the right policy tools that will both allow them to enhance their economies by deploying AI, as well as thinking through how to mitigate those risks. And so I'm very pleased to introduce Deputy Minister Kennedy to walk us through some of these topics this afternoon. And of course, Deputy Minister Kennedy has had a very impressive career in the public service and served in a variety of senior roles in deputy minister level. He was appointed as the Deputy Minister of ISED in 2019, where he promptly had to lead ISED's response to the global pandemic, where he worked closely with industry to pivot towards manufacturing of medical supplies and building up domestic biomanufacturing capacity, in addition to quickly rolling out support programs to support businesses affected by lockdowns. He continues to oversee an ambitious economic recovery agenda at ISED, partnering with companies to support innovation and industrial transformation, including through major investments to decarbonize industry and attract new supply chains. Please join me in welcoming Deputy Minister Kennedy. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that lovely introduction. I get exhausting just hearing about the last 5 years. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. Good afternoon, members of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, honored guests. Thanks very much for being here today and for inviting me to talk about this very important topic. I'd like to begin my remarks by recognizing that as we are in Ottawa today, we are gathered on the unceded land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of the Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples, the contributions they've made in both shaping and strengthening this community in particular, and our province and our entire country. As we reflect on the importance of history and tradition, we also want to look to the future, and today we're going to be talking about some pretty bold developments, facing us in the future, namely in the realm of artificial intelligence. AI is reshaping every sector. I know you, as people who follow this very carefully, understand that. It's changing sectors from health to transport, to education to finance. As advanced generative AI systems become more pervasive and increasingly capable, the range of uses of AI grows ever more rapidly. And as AI becomes more integrated into economic and social systems and processes, there is the potential for improved efficiency, for better data-informed trends and insights, better decisions, better outcomes across so many fields, such as healthcare. I previously was responsible for Health Canada, and we were seeing, when I was at Health Canada, when we're the major regulator of drugs and medical devices, AI was making transformative changes in the health field, as just one example. At the same time, there are also risks that require careful management and transparency. I don't need to tell you all about risks like bias and discrimination, but there are also risks to health and safety, the risk of fueling disinformation and cyber threats, and so on. And as we see the rise of AI across so many sectors of the economy, we also see potential, impacts on the labor market. Firms and organizations are going to have to come to grips with all of these. They will need to prioritize building capacity in AI, training personnel, fostering a workforce that is knowledgeable and can operate in a competitive landscape that really will have been transformed by this technology. Governments, for their part, need to be worried about putting in place frameworks to help manage and mitigate risks across sectors while allowing our society to seize AI's tremendous potential, its potential for innovation and benefits to citizens. It will be important to ensure that Canada's economic, social, and democratic institutions remain stable and secure in a new world that will be transformed by AI, and that AI-generated deployment within and across sectors aligns with our values as a country and our principles. Whether through shared principles, standards, regulations, policy actions, Canada will need to use a wide range of tools and approaches as we tackle the vast and varied implications of AI, whether they be ethical, economic, societal, security-related, and so that we can position ourselves to seize its innovation potential. This is a transformative technology, not unlike perhaps in a kind of past era electricity, and it's going to have a transformative impact across our economy and society, and we need to modernize and evolve our rules and our guardrails to account for that. Canada has a long-standing commitment to responsible AI innovation. I think that's not an overstatement. Canada has been lucky enough to be home to many of the leading world-class experts on AI. It is these experts who came to define Canada's global reputation as a leader in this field, who first pushed and continue to push for Canada to be a leader in the responsible use and development of AI. The Government of Canada's Pan-Canadian AI strategy is a testament to this commitment to responsible AI. The strategy serves as a blueprint for advancing research and development while solidifying Canada's impact on the global stage. Through the strategy, as many of you know, we have 3 national AI institutes, Vector, Amy, and Mila, that have become beacons of pioneering research and are central to our sustained excellence and leadership in AI. Canada is also driving innovation through strategic initiatives such as the Global Innovation Superclusters and the Strategic Innovation Fund. These 2 initiatives are managed by my organization, which are providing funding to support AI innovation at dynamic and exciting companies. And just to name a couple, I hope I'm not leaving out too many people: Sanctuary Cognitive Systems Corporation, Exfo, Creative Destruction Labs, Ultra Electronics, and so on. These programs, such as the cluster program, such as the SIF, are not just funding mechanisms. They are incubators for transformative AI projects, bridging the gap between conceptual AI research, of which Canada does a great deal, and market-ready innovations. We need to do more to be translating AI innovations to the market, and that's part of what these programs do. Canada's investments in AI are fostering a vibrant environment where innovation flourishes. I don't think that's an overstatement. Canada is home to 20 public AI research labs, 75 AI incubators and accelerators, and 60 groups of AI investors across the country. Canada has generated, according to the latest statistics, at least 30 unicorns, companies that reach a $1 billion market cap without being listed on the stock market. 21 currently hold unicorn status. Many Canadian unicorns are deploying or in the process of deploying AI solutions. Canada's major AI clusters are located in hubs in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Kitchener-Waterloo, and Edmonton. They are becoming magnets for other industries to locate in those regions because of the access they will get to AI expertise. Canada is home to approximately 1,500 firms developing or implementing AI solutions, including several of the world's most promising firms in this space. Cohere, I saw on the screen earlier, Coveo, Mindbridge, Brainbox AI, Ada, Xanadu, Untether AI, and the list goes on. Canada's growth in the AI sector is also commendable. We lead the G7 in the growth rate of our AI talent, and we have seen a significant surge in AI-related patent filings. There's been a 57% increase in those filings in this last year alone. We're third among the G7 in venture capital investment for AI, showcasing our commitment to nurturing this sector. I think you can make a good case that the Government of Canada is seizing every opportunity to stimulate innovation and the possibilities offered by this technology. While Canada has been an early leader, there is more work to be done. We can't take for granted that we will maintain our leadership without more action. Canada's emerging digital technology expertise, Our strong and diverse talent pool and access to green energy solutions all make us an excellent candidate for international AI collaboration opportunities. Now is the time for Canadian companies to harness the potential of these technologies to build future products and services that will be competitive in the world economy, attract investment, and bring talent to Canada. The importance of governance to the development and adoption of AI across sectors has become evident in recent years. As AI has become more pervasive across the economy, Canadians have become more conscious of the potential impacts on their lives. Positive, obviously, but also the potential risks. This has challenged Canadian innovators to demonstrate world-leading governance in order to build trust in the technology. It will also be incumbent on policymakers to champion the ethical and responsible uses of AI, grounded in Canadian values of fairness, equity, and social responsibility. Values that move us beyond safeguards for technical compliance to a deeper commitment of responsibility, trustworthiness, and ethical AI practices. As we embrace AI technologies, and we do, it is essential to foster public trust in these technologies through transparency, accountability, and the development of common standards. The Government of Canada is actively working to shape a future where AI is not only something that bolsters economic growth, but also aligns with the highest standards for responsible innovation. My organization, ISED, is spearheading efforts in this domain. The government has proposed the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, or ADA, which if passed will be one of the world's first dedicated AI laws, demonstrating Canada's continued leadership in AI policy and underscoring our commitment to proactive risk assessment and management. And I'm sure we'll be having a bit of a discussion of ADA in the Fireside chat. ADA will apply to systems that have high potential impacts on Canadians due to their context of use, as well as general purpose AI systems that come with a broader risk profile. While ADA is still navigating the parliamentary process, Minister Champagne, my boss, has taken a proactive approach to addressing the most urgent risks posed by AI by launching a code of conduct for generative AI this past September. The code aims to identify practices that companies should take to identify and mitigate the risks associated with the development or use of AI systems. It is based on principles that we will all recognize of safety, fairness, transparency, validity and robustness, human oversight, and accountability. The Code of Conduct is not regulation, and compliance with it is voluntary, but it's designed to be consistent with global benchmarks and form a bridge to the forthcoming regulatory regime under the new legislation. As a result, companies who commit to the code should find an easier time complying with expectations under ADA once it comes into force. The government's vision for AI governance also involves strengthening international collaboration and creating transparent and robust governance frameworks for AI. Canada is deeply involved, and we are often playing a leadership role in the work being done by many international fora to foster responsible AI development and use and ensure that AI benefits are widely distributed and the risks are mitigated. We are actively engaged in discussions on AI governance in forums such as the G7, the Hiroshima process under the G7, the G20, the UN, the OECD, and the recent UK AI Safety Summit held at Bletchley Park. Additionally, Canada is a founding member and a leading voice, as many here will know, in the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, also known as GPAI, which has been a central platform for international collaboration. GPAI gathers world-leading AI experts from 28 countries and the EU to undertake practical projects focused on orienting the development, governance, and use of AI technologies towards shared values. Supporting responsible innovation, implementing appropriate governance frameworks, and engaging in international collaboration, these are all crucial elements to secure Canada's success and leadership in the domain of AI. But for AI to reach its full potential, we need to build and secure public understanding of and trust in this revolutionary technology. In a report published earlier this year, the Public Awareness Working Group of Canada's AI Advisory Council recognized that, and I'm quoting here, AI awareness initiatives must consider not only the fundamentals of AI systems, but also the additional awareness to engage on the social, economic, ethical, and political elements of AI. We do not need all Canadians to be engaging directly in the development of new advanced AI algorithms, but we do need the Canadian public to have a fundamental understanding of how AI is being used in their lives, how they can and should interact with it, why it can be beneficial, how risks are being mitigated, and how it can impact the broader systems that AI is being integrated into. Canada is fortunate to have one of the most educated workforces in the world. by investing further in public knowledge and understanding of the opportunities and the risks of AI. In addition to investing in AI talent development, commercialization standards, and governance, we can seek to ensure that Canadians in all parts of the country can reap the potential benefits of AI while avoiding or mitigating risks. Ultimately, this is about building trust that this technology will be used for good and building literacy in the population so that they understand more about what it is and is not. Canada's approach to artificial intelligence has been, and indeed must be, defined by a steadfast commitment to strategic innovation and risk management and a strong emphasis on international collaboration. We stand firm in our dedication to developing AI technologies that are not only beneficial for Canadians, but also contribute positively to the global community. As we move forward, I'm confident that our collective efforts and discussions can pave the way for AI to become a beacon of innovation and a foundational element in driving societal progress. You're all a big part of that, obviously, in the work you do, and so I want to thank you for being here today and working with us as we undertake this journey. Thank you. You want to sit down now? Is that what's happening?
Sure, let's sit down. Thank you for that, Deputy Minister. And I think we have some mics?
We have one right here.
We have one right here. Oh, and I have one. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Catherine Fortin-LeFaivre from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So thank you for those remarks, Deputy Minister. We have a lot of ground to cover because your department is so large and covers so many hot topics. I'm sure there's never a dull moment for you. I'm going to get started with a question on AI business adoption. It's a question and a topic that we're hearing a lot more of at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. We're seeing a lot of interest in that. Specifically, findings from our business data lab that's in the Canadian Chamber, as well as a September report from the DAIS, point to a very low AI adoption rate amongst Canadian businesses. And this surprises many. Specifically, our data indicated that in early 2023, only 6% of Canadian businesses were planning on adopting AI. The adoption rate was even lower for small businesses. Meanwhile, Canada's productivity is increasingly lagging behind the US and many other global peers. We rank 18th in the OECD. Increasingly, AI adoption could boost our national productivity. How is ISED moving the needle in terms of AI adoption amongst Canadian businesses? And how can Canadian industry better support and collaborate with ISED and other government bodies to increase AI adoption?
So that's a great question. We are the royal we. I would say ISED, certainly myself, colleagues who work in this space, understand that adoption is a really important part of the equation. Canada's been a really significant leader in the research space and has been for a very long time. And a lot of the leaders in the field actually, after we had been through the first iteration of the Pan-Canadian strategy for AI, the kind of first big investment, national investment in AI, actually raised, we need to be doing more to get the great ideas that are being developed and the kind of the algorithms and all of the work. We need to get that translated into the economy. So in the second iteration of the Pan-Canadian AI strategy, there is a specific stream around adoption where we've given money to the institutes to work with businesses, work with people out in hospitals, work with people out in society to try to translate a lot of the research work and the work that's being done by researchers in the Canadian research ecosystem, kind of get that out onto the street and get it out into the economy. So that's one example. We have programming like the Canada Digital Adoption Program. We have other programming that is specifically designed to kind of support small business in the adoption of digital technologies. And what we've seen through the CDAP program, the Digital Adoption Program, there's actually a meaningful share of the companies that come in, do their digital adoption plans, and then get a grant to actually put the tech in place is actually a meaningful share that are actually they're adopting AI in their businesses. So those are just two examples, but definitely, there's other work being done through the SIF, the Supercluster program. There's funding for the clusters to actually work with the companies in their ecosystems to encourage and kind of build literacy and help to adopt AI. So there's a lot of stuff going on to support adoption in addition to the research part. I would say though, and a lot of folks here probably know this, there is a long-standing issue in Canada that our business sector, and I'm not picking on individual businesses, but in the aggregate, our business sector we're not as technology intensive. We invest at a lower rate than some of our competitors. Certainly in the small business sector in particular, the rate of digital adoption in Canada is markedly lower than, say, in the United States. And there's a lot of maybe reasons for that, but it is a worry. The worry we have about digital adoption has been a worry for many years. AI just kind of takes it to a new level. I think in terms of what the chamber and leaders in the business sector could do, look, I'm not a business person, I'm a long-serving public servant, but I would say, I think part of the issue is a literacy issue. I think as people understand how important this technology is, you're probably gonna see adoption rates accelerate. But I have to admit, like even in my own organization, I won't name the details here, but there was one area where we had a real backlog and we were kind of struggling to figure out, like, how can we transform our business process? And we asked the question, could we use AI not to make the decisions, because we have laws and rules and so on, but can we use AI for decision support to kind of make some of these processes very much more efficient? Because in government you have a lot of these processes where you're looking at an application, like you're dealing with many thousands of tasks that are like piecework, and you could use AI and other kind of data analytics to speed that up, create different piles that officials could look at and that kind of stuff. And so I have to say I was quite surprised, because we had some people come in, and indeed we're actually adopting the technology, and it's actually dramatically improved our efficiency without actually changing the fundamental decision-making process. It's just made decision-making faster and more efficient. And I'm someone who's got some literacy, and I'm in charge of some of this. And I just, I was thinking, well, how easy is it really going to be to do this? And it turns out it was a lot easier than I might have imagined, and a lot less expensive than I would have imagined. So if I'm like that, I can't imagine how many small business owners who are just trying to make payroll every month and so on, like, the idea, hey, you should adopt this like cutting edge technology that's going to radically transform your business. The assumption I would think might be, well, that's going to be really complicated and so on. So I think building literacy and kind of maybe taking the intimidation factor out of some of this, like, it's, in my case, it turned out to be a lot easier than I imagined it might be. I don't know how true that would be for a small business, but I think there's, do people have the time and the energy to devote to something? And if it's new and complicated and you're not sure how it adds value, then some of the way you can be helpful is mentoring. I mean, there's a lot of mentoring networks in the business sectors, and some of that's about teaching people how to export. If you never exported to India, you might find it intimidating, but actually if you can work with someone who's done it and help show you the ropes, it makes it a lot less problematic. So that would be one suggestion, I think, is there's a literacy issue, I think, more generally, especially in smaller businesses who don't have the bandwidth to be having dedicated personnel for this kind of work.
Well, I like your example specifically about the CDAP, the Canadian Digital Adoption Program, because I know I had heard of it when it came out, and then just recently I had the pleasure of meeting with some of your people at ISED who walked me through the program and showed me the improvements that you've made since it started and how quickly it is to be approved.
It's easier to sign up than it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they told me. So I would encourage everybody to check it out. I think that's a great gateway, especially for smaller organizations, right, to develop a plan. All right, let's talk a little bit about guardrails. A key consideration around AI regulation is the notion of needing to provide guardrails, of course, that will allow sufficient user and social protection while promoting innovation and ensuring that we can really benefit from the advantages of AI. Some industry stakeholders fear that AI will harm economic growth and innovation. So we hear a lot about that balance, right? How can we ensure that the regulatory framework you're bringing in will provide the right guardrails without stifling innovation, particularly with regard to SMEs?
So I would maybe make a couple of points. One is obviously, as a government ministry and as we have playing a lead role on policy for AI. The government is concerned, and we at ISED are concerned with a couple of things. One is, we want to make sure that Canada can seize the benefits of AI. We want to make sure we can seize the innovation potential and the potential to transform lives for the better and to improve businesses and all the really good stuff. We totally want that. And in fact, it would be a tragedy if concerns about risks resulted in things being locked down to such an extent that we aren't able to seize those benefits. As I mentioned, I used to be the Deputy Minister at Health Canada. AI has tremendous potential to do all kinds of wonderful things in terms of therapeutics and, you know, things that'll extend lives and cure disease and so on. So we don't want to lose that. At the same time, like any tremendously powerful technology, there are risks. I mean, you know, when electricity started being deployed widely, electricity is, I mean, we've got all kinds of safety standards now and rules and so on, but electricity is very dangerous, as anybody who maybe has touched a live wire discovers pretty quickly. And so, you know, it's a powerful technology that's made our lives better, but you know, you need to have some basic rules of the road. And so we have evolved over years, if I continue with the electricity example, norms and standards. Some of those are hard law. Some of those are codes of practice. I mean, there's all, you know, they span a whole range of things. It's not all kind of one size fits all. And I think what, you know, and again, I'm speaking in a personal capacity, I guess, as opposed to, you know, government policy. But this is the way I think about it. You know, what we're trying to do with the legislative frameworks, you know, is we're trying to strike the right balance between making sure that we're creating a framework that will actually encourage responsible use and ethical use and build trust. Because, you know, you can have great technology, but if nobody trusts it, like, it's a problem. And so, you know, we want to make sure we have all that stuff, because that's important. And we want it to be as least intrusive as is necessary to achieve the objective, because we actually want the innovation. So it's like, it is a balance, trying to strike a balance. And as with any balance, there'll be a debate. I mean, there are going to be people who think we haven't done enough. There are going to be people who think we've done too much. You know, if everybody was in complete agreement in a space like AI, I would be kind of shocked, because you've got, you know, civil society groups, and you get industry, you get really heterogeneous group of stakeholders. So it's normal that there will be people debating whether we got the balance right, and then that's part of democracy. So I'm not saying we got the balance right. That's, you know, there'll have to be a judgment. Parliament will judge, industry, civil society will judge, but that's what we've tried to do, is strike the right balance between, you know, just letting her rip without really any, you know, any sort of framework, and having a framework that is appropriate to allow the benefits. So, and what I would say, if you look at the ADA, and again, this is a policy choice, and there will be people who will agree and there'll be others who disagree, and we've seen that actually in the reaction. The government made a deliberate choice to bring in what wonks like me would call framework legislation. And so the way I liken it is, I liken it to consumer product regulation. It's not a perfect analogy. If there are lawyers in the room, you could criticize my analogy. But if you go into your average Walmart, there's probably 30 or 40,000 different products in one of these big stores. It would be impossible to write a law that imagined every permutation of every single product in the store. And that's not the way governments regulate consumer product safety. They generally have a rule of general application that puts an obligation on you, if you're selling consumer products, to take steps to make sure they're safe. If you become aware that it's dangerous, you have an obligation to let people know and withdraw it from the market. Like, you have a set of general rules that apply. And then for certain kinds of products that are either more dangerous or there's something special about them, there may be very specific rules and regulations. So I know this from my days at Health Canada, because Health Canada administers our consumer protection law. So we have a law of general application. Any consumer product you sell falls under the law. But there are certain products, because they're more sensitive, like baby clothing, cribs, you know, cribs and cradles, like stuff, you know, stuff for very vulnerable populations. There are very specific rules. And there you get into a lot of granular detail. And if you're building a crib and you're selling it, you better build it to these exact specifications. Some of the critiques of the ADA have been, this is just sort of my explanation, is there's not nearly enough detail. We need all this precision. Well, we're talking about a general purpose technology that's going to transform all parts of society. You know, writing a very, very prescriptive and detailed bill to imagine all of these, that's possible. But the risk, as someone who's been in government a long time, is you get it wrong, or you write a very, very detailed bill, and by the time you're done writing the bill and passing it, the world has changed. And now the bill, we actually have legislation in Canada at the federal level, it may have changed by now, that requires industries to submit their information to the government of Canada by fax machine. The law requires that you submit it by fax. So, like, you know, that would have been great 30 years ago, but nobody uses a fax machine anymore. So there's lots of examples where you write very prescriptive stuff and then it's very rapidly out of date. Another way to approach it is you write laws that are more principles based, if it looks like a duck and talks like a duck, whatever the expression is, then it's probably a duck and we're going to regulate it like a duck. And then you bring in regulations as you get experience or as you need additional detail. And in some respects, that's what the ADA is designed to do. The thinking was, we want to get a law of general application that basically imposes this kind of positive obligation to act responsibly. There'll be additional rules and requirements for those who deploy high impact systems, if you're doing things that affect people's health or their safety or their finances. But we're going to take the time to develop the very specific details around the additional requirements in these particular areas. And part of the thinking was, this is a very fast moving field. We actually have to go talk to people. It's going to take time to actually develop detailed rules and regulations. So the downside of that, if I'm playing this out, is if you're an investor, you might say, well, I don't know the final rule yet, and maybe it'll affect me. But the upside is we can now take the time to work with industry to get rules that make sense. We did not just emerge with an extraordinarily detailed bill, imagining that we could foresee every future scenario. So I think there's a debate to be had, and you'll find lots of people who like the general nature of the rules. You'll find others who are quite concerned that they don't know every detail. The last thing I would say, because you can tell I've been thinking about this a little bit, we have heard, well, like there are criminal penalties, we can be subject to major fines. And I don't want to criticize people, like they're all legitimate questions people have raised. But I think, and it may be, as a regulator, I've been a regulator a long time, like maybe you get sort of insider knowledge and maybe we should be explain this better. But generally speaking, in the regulatory world, your emphasis with actors who are working in good faith is to encourage compliance. So the first thing you do if somebody makes a mistake is you don't bring the hammer down and bring out and prosecute. The first thing is to say, you're not really supposed to be doing that. Can you please come back into compliance? And indeed, I can give you lots of examples from many regulatory frameworks where the last resort is, like in the ADA, the criminal offenses are for true criminal offenses. I'm not a lawyer, but it's like, you murder somebody, that's you're violating the criminal code, you go to jail for that. There are regulatory offenses, which is you've done something that's contrary to regulations, but you still need the public prosecution service to agree to prosecute. And that's kind of a very late step in the process. Usually with regulatory, where someone's not fully in compliance with the regulation, the interest for a party acting in good faith is you want them to be in compliance. So you call them up and you say, if you have repeated non-compliance, people are abusing this kind of, flexibility to just repeatedly be doing something not supposed to be doing. That's veering into, being more serious. But generally speaking, the kind of penalties, in particular the criminal penalties, the kinds of concerns we have sometimes heard of, I'm going to make an honest mistake, and next thing you know, I'm going to go to jail. Well, I would say that that's not the way regulatory compliance works, and that is not the orientation of regulators. It is a graduated process where people who are trying to be in compliance, the government, works with them to sort of make sure that they're able to follow the rules. And it's only people who are committing criminal conduct or kind of willfully disregarding the rules or doing something that's egregious where you get into those more serious kinds of consequences. But any kind of set of rules where there's no consequences at all is not credible. So by definition, any meaningful regulatory scheme anywhere in the world in this space is going to have consequences. So you can't have a regime with no consequences because it doesn't pass some basic credibility tests, but the consequences are meant to be this very responsible graduated approach. So maybe I'll...
Well, you read my mind, because that was actually my next follow-up question. It is something that we've heard a lot about, the criminal liability aspect, so thank you for addressing that. From a global perspective, AI regulation is moving quickly, again, as evidenced by two major statements from the UK and the US 2 weeks ago. We also know that the EU AI Act is about to pass, and that there are over 100 AI bills and counting in the world in the works at the moment. How's the Canadian government keeping up and ensuring that our proposed AI regulations are interoperable with large economies and in keeping with best practices?
So a couple of comments. One is we are involved in all of those discussions, like deeply involved in all of them. We participate in them. We're in some respects a leading contributor in those conversations. So this is whether it's the G7 or the G20 or the UK process or others, we're not watching on television and then we're actually in the room. We're part of these. We're generally part of these dialogues. So we're an active contributor. And Canada, because we're such an early player in AI, and because we have a national strategy that's in its second 5-year iteration, and because we have founders in the field who are leaders in the field, we're not just a player, like we're one of the key players. So this is an area where it's a well-worn expression. I'm not fond of it, but we punch above our weight. That's true. And so I think one of the ways we're ensuring interoperability is we're part of those discussions. The second is we've tried, people will be the judge, we tried to design the frameworks and the work product we put out, whether it's the voluntary code we've worked on with industry, whether it's the bill, to account for, you know, the state of where the world is going in this space. The last thing I would say is, as a country, you know, as a government, but I would say, you know, secular trend over many governments, you know, of different persuasions over the years, we have a lot of experience as a small open market economy of navigating, you know, slight differences or differences in standards and approaches across major economies. This shows up in, you know, this shows up in a lot of ways on security issues. If you get on an airplane and you fly from, you know, Ottawa to Paris, I mean, you know, there are rules about what passport data gets shared and all that. And the American rules are different than the European rules. In the online space, anybody here who runs a digital business will know that the rules in the US are not the same as GDPR in the European Union. And we have to make sure that for our businesses to be able to operate across borders, that there has to be interoperability and reciprocity and this kind of stuff. And so, for example, on digital and data rules more generally, we have an equivalency agreement with the Europeans recognize our privacy regime is equivalent to GDPR, and we dialogue regularly with the Europeans, and we're interested in making sure we maintain that equivalency, because if we don't, then suddenly Canadian companies who want to do business in Europe have to be worried that complying with Canadian law will not be enough. So I don't want to jump too far ahead, but we're an active part of the dialogue. We've tried to design the frameworks we have to date to be, you know, aligned with kind of the best practices or thinking internationally. And then more generally, where there will inevitably be minor differences, because there are in almost every domain, there are modalities to kind of manage some of those differences. And then that shows up everywhere. I mean, you know, anybody who's doing cross-border trade will know that this is a live issue no matter what business you're in. And there are often processes to kind of make sure that there's equivalency. And I would imagine it'll be the same thing here.
Although arguably this space is moving probably quicker than a lot
Yeah,
of other sectors.
the whole world is moving more
Yes.
quickly, I would say. I mean, AI is a really perhaps the best example, but this challenge of events kind of outstripping our ability to react shows up, as in a regulatory sense, shows up in all kinds of fields.
Fair.
Yeah.
I'll just, I think we're about at time. Do we have time for a question or two from the audience? Yes. Okay, great. So we have Dan. Dan, right in front of me. Can you introduce yourself, Dan?
Yes, thank you so much. That was very eye-opening. On the same topic, but from a sovereignty perspective, the penultimate benefactor of this AI movement are American cloud providers. Azure switched all Statistics Canada over. The other clouds are campaigning to have universities throw out their computers and have thin clients that, you know, everything. 30% of Canadian companies are spending their IT budgets on cloud, and that's $10 billion a year. We can push for more of this digitization, but what is the sovereignty considerations and self-reliance and sustainability from our own Canadian perspective to not just become thin shells and consumers of API endpoints for foreign companies?
So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to totally satisfactorily answer your question. I would say that's a live issue that we hear about, and there are lots of people actively working on and thinking about that. And it's so I'm probably not answering your question because I think I'm not in a position. I'm not the I'm also not the decision maker. Oh, well, here's what we're going to do or whatever. But it's just to say, I think it's a good question. It's one that we do get, and there have been a variety of solutions proffered as to how to deal with some of these issues. So, for example, some have advocated that AI is so important that we need a version of like a kind of an international, organization that has the compute firepower to allow governments to train algorithms and to test and all that without having to rely on some of the hyperscalers. I mean, and we even hear this from some of the business sector in Canada too, which is, gosh, it'd be really great if we had the firepower domestically to do some of this training, because otherwise we're sort of totally dependent on going to one of the big players in the US, and so by definition, maybe that maybe that creates a sovereignty issue or a capture problem. So I would not, I think it's a legitimate question. I don't have an answer for it, but I think there are people who are discussing this, and and it's I guess watch this space. I guess I don't have a good answer for you right now, but just to say, and again, it's a little bit like in the platform universe we're in now, where these kind of business models can scale massively, based on kind of platform technology. That the AI issue is an acute one, but it's not the first time that concern has shown up, right? There was a real issue, for example, after 9/11 with the Patriot Act, and then people were really concerned that, Canadian data is maybe passing through a U.S. data center and isn't now captured by the Patriot Act. So it's been an issue that's been around for a while, but I appreciate AI has maybe put a line under it, and there is a lot of discussion going on about that. And the Europeans and others are also talking about it. How do we maintain a measure of sovereignty because of the compute firepower you need to actually train these systems?
I think we have time for one more question. Just one. Okay. Any other takers? The Deputy Minister. Yes. Do we have any online questions? Okay.
There's a lot of comments about adoption of AI by Canadian companies and the difficulty there. I find more challenging than that is the fact that this room isn't 6 times bigger than it is. In other words, AI companies that are Canadian based and flourishing globally. I think that's even in worse shape than challenge number 1. What is the government thinking about really driving that kind of, let's create our Canadian champions, sovereignty challenges aside, there's no reason why we can't. It's just, I don't know if it's our DNA, I don't know if it's our risk-taking level, I don't know, it's a combination of things, but we really need to do something there, because that's many hundreds of thousands or millions of amazing jobs that are going to be created elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, I would agree that we have a strong interest in creating world scale and supporting Canadian AI companies. Completely agree with that. And I don't want to be too Pollyanna-ish about it, but that is a part of our remit, and that's part of what we're working on. So, I just give a couple of examples, but certainly we've made some major investments in AI companies through, for example, the Strategic Innovation Fund. I mentioned earlier through the Pan-Canadian AI strategy, we've added this commercialization stream. So is that sufficient? We could argue, well, no, there's more that we could do. I would say, I think the AI scaling issue is maybe a subset of a problem that's been with Canada a long time, and that we've talked about a lot, which is we're really great at creating startups. We've struggled a bit to create scale-ups, and we have a history, I guess, of we have a history of companies with really, really great and innovative tech developed in Canada. Depends on the sector you're in, but actually having trouble getting that adopted in Canada. Like they have to get adopted abroad before they can come back, and and I've heard the expression like no one ever got fired for buying IBM. Like it's kind of like we may not, on the evidence, at least historically, have had an economy where you've had a lot of willingness of businesses to try something new, and so whereas in an economy where maybe the competitive intensity is higher or the business culture is maybe different, there may be more of willingness to try something new if it'll give you an edge in your competitor. And so, I could tell you, like in the health tech business, anybody in health tech will tell you this, certainly any startup in health tech, like many Canadian health tech companies, their first sales are in the US. They're not into the Canadian healthcare system. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. And then when you're really successful, sometimes it's easier to get purchasing. Well, that's, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But it's just to say, I think there's a risk maybe of that in this space as well, which is, if our adoption rates of tech in the business sector generally are lower than if you have a really leading Canadian AI tech company, what are the odds their tech is going to be taken up faster in our own market as against, say, the United States? So I think this raises a whole bunch of issues that have been with us for a long time. The structure of our economy, it's historically largely SME driven. A lot of our growth was not driven by innovation; it was driven by population expansion, women entering the workforce. We had a very resource intensive economy. Now, in the future, a lot of the things that maybe really worked in our favor, maybe they're still important. They're still a really important foundation for our success, but innovation will be much more important. Like labor force is likely to grow at it's not going to grow at the same rate. So we can't rely on labor force growth to drive, economic growth as much. Resources are still important, but, there's a big push now on net zero energy. And so like an energy intensive, resource driven economy. And then of course with AI, the competitive edge actually goes to companies that, don't just have the resource, but they can use the data to better exploit and use the resource. And so technology and innovation become much more important, which is why the government's put such a big emphasis on it. But all of this to say, if our historic track record is we're not great at that. We're not great at tech adoption. We're not great at innovation writ large, not individual firms. And so with AI being so transformative, like we have to become better at it, because this is such a transformative technology that we're going to have to figure out how to use it and benefit from it, or it's going to be a real issue. So I agree with the comments, the sentiments, and it is something we worry about a lot, not just in the AI space, but we have lots of post-pandemic. We've got a lot of really fantastic companies in the biotech space. We do not have we're on our way to having a couple, which is really just fantastic. But at the moment, we arguably don't have any very large anchor biotech companies. We don't have a Eli Lilly or a Pfizer or a Novo Nordisk or whatever. We're on our way with some companies. Hopefully we get there. But, we lack scale in a lot of sectors where we have great startup. Clean tech's another. We are one of the world leading countries on clean tech. We don't really have a whole bunch of multi-billion-dollar clean tech firms. We have a lot of great startups. So, and our biggest companies tend to be in regulated sectors: banking, transport, telecom, et cetera. So some of this is a historical thing, but all this to say, objectively, would we like to grow more companies in these areas where we have really great startups and a world-class, global companies that, acquire others? Absolutely. And that's what we want to do. But this is that's not an overnight issue to work on. It's kind of a longer term project.
Hard to disagree with that. Well, thank you very much,
Thank
Deputy
you.
Minister.
Yep.
That was very insightful.
Good luck with your summit.